Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Rebecca, thank you for joining Lawyers Who Learn. Super excited about having you on. And I don't know where this adventure, this conversation is going to go, but I know there's a lot of places I want to cover today.
Thank you, David. I'm honored and delighted to be here.
Yes. Well, and what first caught my attention is Jarrett posted on LinkedIn about this amazing course that you were teaching at University of California, Irvine Law School, which after doing a little bit of research, you actually wrote a book on it. And I think it's called The Happiness and Peak Performance in Law School. We're going to get to that, but I just wanted to share that. I also just wanted to share the purpose of this podcast. It's called Lawyers Who Learn. As you probably know, I run a CLE company for the past 17 or 25 years. It's been around. But it's also recognizing 98% of learning happens outside of a CLE course. And so this podcast is about discovering how you've learned in your career, but also you're a teacher and you're a coach and a wellness instructor. We'll see where we go there. And you work with your husband. So that's super cool. But you had asked me before we started, you said, well, before we start this podcast, can we do something that I do in every meeting to start off? So let's give you the floor.
Thanks, David. So for everyone who's listening to this, I hope that you'll participate with David and I have to ask you, David, have you ever done a 4-part breathing exercise before?
I've done breathing exercises before, yes.
Great. So this won't be new to you, but for anyone who's listening, if this is new to you, I just ask you to open your mind to the scientific truth that when we get grounded and focused in our breath, we actually have better attention spans, more resilience, and it can be a core professional competency to getting us more energized with better performance in our work and life. So whenever I start a meeting or a class, I like to do a grounding exercise. It's mostly selfish so that I can get focused and organized for the meeting or the class, but it also helps the participants. So for you and I, David, we'll just do this. We'll settle into our seat and ground ourselves. If you want to cast your eyes down or close them if it feels comfortable. And just become aware of the present moment. This will just be a 1-minute exercise. It's called 4-part breath or box breathing. I'll lead us. We're going to breathe in to the count of 4 and then hold our breath to the count of 4. Breathe out to the count of 4 and hold out to the count of 4. Usually we do it 4 times, but we'll just do it twice together. So here we go. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath, 2, 3, 4. Let it out, 2, 3, 4. Hold it out, 2, 3, and 4. And once more, a little deeper. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath, 2, 3, 4. Let it out, 2, 3, 4. And hold it out, 2, 3, and 4. Very good. Now you'll just take a deep, meaningful breath in. Let it out. And we'll come back together in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. You can open your eyes whenever it feels comfortable.
It worked. So a couple, when we do our weekly meetings for our leadership team, we don't do breathing exercises. We do appreciation, but I'm going to try this. We have a meeting tomorrow and I'm going to see if I'm going to hijack, instead of doing appreciation, I'll do this and I'll do it 4 times. Because what happened was, instead of figuring out, okay, what questions am I going to ask? How am I going to make this interview great? How am I going to do? I'm just I just chilled and I did that. And you asked me about my breathing work before, and I had done some, through YPO, some, courses, 1-day sessions on the Wim Hof breathing technique. And we did some sound baths with other breathing things. And one of the things that happened to me, because it was more for a lot, my entire body started tingling, literally tingling that I thought the floor was vibrating. And it really made me scared because like I felt out of control in a way. And so it's so interesting how you can take breathing to that level, or you can take breathing to this level. And it's always right there waiting for you if you want to take a pause in your day. So
well said, David.
I don't know. It's just like, it felt great. So I appreciated that. And originally when you brought it up, I'm like, no, we're not going to do it. And I'm like, shut up, Dave, let's do it. So, okay. Let me just tell you what's floating in my head a little bit. And then I want to ask you kind of like what's exciting to you to talk about that you don't get to talk about so much. So what's interesting to me, and I want to cover in different areas. I just think it's unique that you and Jarrett have a consultancy together. Not only do you have a consultancy together, you're both attorneys, both focused on well-being, and you're both really well-spoken speakers and well-accomplished. And like, that is fascinating. You also written a book on a really important topic, and I saw you have a book that's focused on law. And that, to me, I want to dive deep. I just did I've done a couple episodes so far on law schools. I just did one with Access Lex Institute with Chris Chapman, and he was talking about Helix. And I also saw, in addition, you have a bar prep course. I don't know if you also saw that Barbary just bought Quimby. So there's a lot happening there. So I want to talk to you about that. I also want to talk to you about your wellness retreats in India, like, and sort of what that's going on. And there's so much more to dive deeper. But I couldn't find too many podcasts about you. I'm sure they're there, but usually it was easier, which I like, because the question I have for you is, you talk about the same things all the time. Is there anything as it relates to your learning and your growth that you don't get to speak about as much that you would love to like explore in addition to those things versus just saying all the things you always say?
What a provocative question, David. I love it. Thank you. I think that breathing released something. First, I want to say that I really am touched that you're going to do the breathing with your group tomorrow. That's a special thing, and I look forward to hearing about how that goes. Next, I want to say just a quick anecdote about when you said to me right after we finished, it worked. It triggered in my mind two stories that I thought your listeners would be interested in, and then I'll get to your question. I'm not stalling.
No, good.
So here's the two anecdotes. I was invited to speak at a corporate law conference, and specifically I was asked to talk about well-being as a core professional competency. And I was on a panel of 4, and so I had limited time, and I chose to open my remarks at a corporate law conference with an experiential exercise, not the 4-part breath, but one called spontaneous remission. And it was a risky move. And when I started, I got a couple eye rolls. A few people actually left. And I had one very skeptical gentleman, an older man in the front row, who stayed, but he was looking at me, with sort of the body language and expression like, this is hooey, but he stayed and he actually did it. And when I was finished, he softened tremendously. He was leaning in and listening to my remarks. And at the end, he was one of 3 that came up to me. He came up to me and he said, I want you to know, Rebecca, that I've got one of these wearable, devices that I just started using last year. And this is the lowest my biometrics have been in the whole year. My blood pressure, my heart rate. And I not only do the biometrics speak to the fact that those 2 minutes you utilized were valuable for me personally, but now I can really understand there's science behind what you're talking about. So I want to apologize if I was giving you kind of the stink eye at the beginning. And he said to me, I'm a convert. 2 minutes.
You're apologizing to me. I'm like, why are you apologizing?
Oh yeah, no, he said, right. He told me, I apologize to you, Rebecca. So he told me I'm a convert, and that was really a special moment when I think this gentleman might have thought that well-being, talking about resiliency and doing these experiential exercises, which is, I believe he'd never done before, was a waste of time or outside of the scope of a corporate legal conference. And then he realized after my remarks, the notion that focusing on resilience and well-being as a core professional competency competency can actually not only up-level our own performance, and of course, as a nice side benefit, our life, but actually can make us better leaders and help others to lead, go by our example. So that's you taking this back to your team is just delightful. And the second story about an experiential exercise having an impact was a student who was at USC Law, who was also using a wearable, who we was in a 1L program in the second semester. And I did the experiential exercise as the first thing of class, the very first thing. They hadn't heard from me yet. And he was very emotional. And at the end of class, he came to me and he was tearing up. And he said that all of the 1L and up to this moment, his anxiety has been off the charts, and his biometrics have shown that he can't get his heart rate down. And he's having trouble sleeping, and he said during that experiential exercise, for the first time since starting law school, my heart rate was down and I saw that it was possible. And then I told the students, of course, about biohacking and how we can do that for ourselves. And that's something that I teach in law school and to law students. But I just wanted to share those two anecdotes. In your preparation materials, you encouraged us to think about stories, and those weren't in my mind. But when you said, I'm going to bring this back to the team, and that worked, it was triggered those two fun stories. And I thought I would quickly share.
I appreciate that. Those are great illustrations, and thank you for following the instructions. I started sending that because I generally just like worth a conversation, but some people just want to know. And so I'm like, okay. And what I did, honestly, I took a bunch of interviews I did, the transcripts, I put it into a ChatGPT. I created my ChatGPT. I said, based on these interviews, I didn't even write that article. I say, create an article on common questions that I ask. And that's what I did.
That's tremendous. I commend you. I love it. Yeah, it was very helpful to me. And I want to say your question about what do you want to talk about that you normally don't get to talk about? That really touched my heart, because folks don't usually start with something that's a little risky like that. They usually say, go with what you've always talked about, be the expert that you are, and so, but one thing I'll share is this past summer, I was invited to speak at the Professional Development Consortium has a conference, and they do these like TED style keynote talks for 15 minutes. And I was invited to submit a proposal, and that proposal was accepted to do one of those talks. And it was the first time in my professional life in 20 years that I spoke publicly about something that happened to me. And it was very scary, and it was very emotional, and it was very challenging. And I got a lot of comments from the audience that you should be talking about this.
Can you share what it was?
I will.
Okay.
I want to say that
I got ahead of you.
Yeah. I thought when you said that, I thought, you know what, maybe I should just share it here, because it's recorded and it'll be, shared, and maybe someone who's listening, this will be useful to them. As some of the audience members told me that it was. I also make it a point at the end of every law school class, in the second to the last class, to share the story with the law students, but it's a different environment. And they've seen me, we have a connection after many court classes together, and law students are much less intimidating, and for me, it didn't feel professionally risky to share the story in the law school context, but it always felt for me challenging or risky or hard to do so in the professional context with lawyers, and when it might implicate my consultancy work. But I'm gonna tell now. In the keynote speech, I spoke at the beginning as if it was a student, and then I pivoted to say, this is actually me. But now I'll do a spoiler alert here that this is me. I actually was a law school dropout. What happened to me was that I was a serial overachiever from almost the day I was born. I was trained by my father, who was managing partner of a firm that was very, very lucrative. And he passed away 6 months ago, very unexpectedly, my father, Craig Simon. But he trained me from an early age. He was grooming me to be an attorney and an advocate and a public speaker from 4 years old. He put me on a talent show stage at 6 to do Laurel and Hardy. And the teachers said, we can't have parents on the stage. This is for the students. So he said, okay, I'll be behind the stage with a mic, and she can just do it, by herself. So he put me out on stage in a tuxedo with a pink cummerbund, and we did Laurel and Hardy. I was 6 years old, so this is like training from very young to be out there and speak and not be afraid. So I was one of those, David, that always got A's, and an A- my father, Craig, would say, Simons don't get A minuses, and like that was upsetting. It was A's or A pluses, and you win. If you join competitions and you win. And I was developing a huge ego, and I wanted everything and I always got A's. And when I was younger, I really felt, and this is very embarrassing to admit, like I'm the smartest person in the room, and I would always go into the environment feeling that way. Certainly I got into great school. I was valedictorian, salutatorian. I won everything, history day, science fair, speech competitions. I was always, I was president of the class, win, A's, top. And I ended up going to UC Berkeley, one of the top public schools in the world. And there I did 2 majors and asked the dean for a special commendation. At that time, they hadn't had someone do this in over 30 years, to do an honors thesis in 2 majors. And they almost didn't let me do it. And I fought and I advocated and I did it. And then I got honors in 2 majors, and I had 4.0 at Berkeley, and and I was ready to go to Harvard and take on the world and, kill it. And a very interesting thing happened to me. Taking the LSAT and practice exams, I was doing great and everything was going well. And when the actual LSAT came, I had never experienced this in my life. I sat down to take the test and I couldn't read the questions, and there wasn't soot in my eyes, and I didn't have a visual problem. The anxiety was so overwhelming. I kept reading the same sentence over and over, and I couldn't process the information, but I didn't know what was happening to me, David. I'd never had a panic attack before. And I didn't understand that my prefrontal cortex is being hijacked, that I'm going into an amygdala attack, that I didn't know any of the science behind stress or anxiety because I'd never experienced that. And I couldn't take the test, so I just bubbled in whatever I could. And I was so ashamed, and I came out crying and panicked. And of course, when the score came back, it was abysmal because it had been, randomly done. And I was too ashamed to tell anybody about the experience. So when my folks asked me how'd you do, I said, oh, great, and I applied everywhere. And I got in the highest ranked school. I was expected to get into Harvard and Stanford and Yale and then have my pick. That was my expectation, but that did not happen. And the best ranked school I got into at the time was UC Davis Law, which is a phenomenal school. And at the time they were 20, a top 20. And now I think they're, in the 20s as well, but it was a top 20 or 21. And it's a phenomenal institution. Anyone should be proud to get in and go there. But because of my ginormous ego and who I was at the time, I was horrified. It was as if my whole life was over because my identity at that time was tied to prestige and achievement. So I concocted a lie. I told everyone that I got a full ride, which I didn't, and that I was going to go so that I could save money and then transfer to Harvard or Yale in my second year. I just told all my friends and colleagues a bold-faced lie about why I was going to Davis. And once I got there, I'm like a pipsqueak, I'm 21, and I went into Davis thinking, well, I'm definitely going to smoke all these people. I'll get all A's. And then once I do that, I'll transfer to Harvard and no one will ever know. It'll all be fine. I'll cover this mistake and this lie. And then once I got there, of course, I was not the smartest person there. There were tremendous intellects, people who were older, who had done other things, and a lot of smart, determined, lovely people, some gunners, who are a little bit hard to deal with, but mostly just wonderful people who were all very smart and bright and wanting to do well, just like most law schools. But I had never faced competition at the level of a curve where we were in different positions in life, even though I had done so well. So when I got to law school, what happened, David? I tried my best for the first, 1L. I gave it all I got. And then at Davis at the time, midterms were in December. So I went into my midterms very confident because I had been working so hard, getting up at 4, staying up till midnight, reading everything, briefing, doing everything, outlining, white knuckling it. I'm going to, all A's. Took the exams. And then this is so long ago that they mailed you, the hard copy grades. So I got it in the mail a couple of weeks after I came back to school, opened it up and started laughing. I said, oh my gosh, they mailed me the wrong grades. They printed someone else's grades. I mean, what a bozo move. So that afternoon, I took my little sheet. I walked in to the dean's office, super relaxed, confident. And I said, hey, Rebecca. I said, hey, I just wanted to, you guys accidentally mailed me someone else's grades. Could you print my actual report card? And they took it from me. They looked, they said, excuse me, talked in the back and come here. And they sat me down, they said, Rebecca, this is your report card. I'm sorry. And I took it up, C minus, C plus, D, A minus, I think it was in legal writing, but I had never seen a C or a D on a report card ever. And it was like, and I took that and I said, oh, okay, thank you. And I ran out. And I ran, they have a lake at UC Davis, and I just ran. I had my backpack and I fell down on the ground and I began to sob, hysterical sobs, because it was the second time I believe my life was over. And now there was no recourse, because now I wasn't going to get all A's and transfer. And what was I going to do? So there's a little trigger warning here for anyone, so that you can pause if you have, emotional sensitivity or if you have suicide in your life. So I was very serious about killing myself. I decided that, well, my life is over and there's no point in living anymore, because I'm not going to go to Harvard, get my law degree, and my whole life was about that. So I might as well just end it now. I stopped eating, I stopped going to class, and I was just trying to figure out how am I going to do it, because I'm a smart girl. I didn't want to really have pain. I didn't want to be like found in my apartment. I had all these really terrible thoughts. And for weeks and weeks, I suffered in this massive depression with suicidal ideations, and didn't actually take a substantial step, but was really close. And finally, when I had so I wasn't attending class, and I got so low, and my mom could tell something was wrong. And she was about to have, coincidentally, a heart procedure. And she had plenty of support for that in April, right before it was about to start studying for finals. But I couldn't take finals. I hadn't gone to class. And my mom said, honey, what's the matter? And I told her everything. And she said, come home. Well, let's work through this. So I told everyone, again, another lie. My mom is really sick and she needs me, and she's going to have this surgery. So I'm taking academic leave. I'm the good daughter, nothing about my failure. I'm going to go home and take care of my mom, because I'm like, top. So then I'll see you guys, see ya. I'm taking academic leave. See you next year. So I did an academic leave. I went home and fell apart and had a massive mental health crisis of epic proportion. Now, the story has a happy ending. And I'm sorry to go on and on. You asked me a question, and this is, the honest answer of what I don't really ever talk about. What happened to me was I learned talk about lifelong learning. This was the beginning at such a young age. I learned that I had spent my first, 15 years of learning, excelling at academics and learning so much about the external world that made me a rock star academically in political science and English and every discipline you can imagine, winning honors and getting A's. But I had no knowledge. The external world I was mastering, the internal world. I had become a elected official in UC Berkeley. I was the Human Welfare and Community Action Council person. I mean, I had achieved so much at a young age, but I had no knowledge of the inner world, the workings of the mind, the interplay between the heart and the mind, how the human body works, how we operate under stress, how we form identity, what it means to be alive, what's the purpose of this human life, all of these existential questions, and the inner work, the mind-body connection, both the body itself and how the psyche and mind operate. So what happened to me was very clear. This is a book I'd highly recommend to anyone who hasn't read it, written in 2006, which was 5 years too late for me, because my existential crisis happened in 2002 when I was in law school for the first time. But Carol Dweck wrote a groundbreaking book in 2006, which now many people know of, which was called Mindsets. And what I had was the classic entrenched, cemented in fixed mindset, that my belief that my worth was tied to my intellect, and that I was born with an exceptional intellect. And anything that was challenging, like law school, or anytime I failed, like the first time I got that report card, meant that I wasn't worthy, that my intellect and identity were in question. So I had this, at a very young age, I had this, crisis moment that brought me because of that crazy fixed mindset. In addition, I learned about grit through the work of Angela Duckworth. And I started taking classes and learning about how the mind works. And I realized, oh, I know what happened to me in the LSAT. I had an anxiety attack, which blocks your prefrontal cortex from operating. It's nothing shameful. It's nothing about my identity. And now I learned why I was drawn to lie, because it was my identity was at stake. So the lie was to preserve, it was an existential threat to my being. And I learned, David, I did so many things. I did Western therapy, Eastern therapy, group therapy. I did retreats. I took courses.
All before you went back to law school.
Oh, I did. So
was this all before you went back, or?
Yeah, so it was a kind of a 10-year journey. It was interesting. I had a mentor. I did a lot of things. I was the executive director of a nonprofit foundation. I ran an LA City Council campaign. I worked for an NBC legal analyst. So I had a lot of I never went back to Davis. After the year was over, I wrote to them and said, I have a very full life in Los Angeles, and I'm going to stay here with my family, and I'm the executive director of a nonprofit now, and thank you very much. And when everyone said, like my father and everyone, you got to go back to law school, you got to go back to law school, for the first several years, it was like, no way, I'll do something else. And so I was resisting the opportunity to try again. But then I got married, and then I got divorced, and that was a great personal crisis for me. So I've been through, the depression, the divorce, and also death of a parent, the three big Ds, which are the best learning on the personal side. But that marriage and divorce at a very young age, in a very short time span, helped me a lot that grow personally. So Jarrett and I were both on our second marriages, and that one's the one that's built to last. And we have a 5-year-old daughter together. We had a child very late in life, which was a surprise and a beautiful challenge. But when the divorce happened, and then I started working for this wonderful lawyer who was an NBC legal analyst, and she was such a powerhouse, so bright and brilliant, and really an advocate for me. And she said to me, Rebecca, you have to go back. You were born to be a lawyer or in the legal world, because I was editing, a lot of her things, and she was a lawyer, and I had all of these ideas and things. She said, you have to go back. She said, listen, Southwestern has a nighttime program. Go back part-time, work for me. You can work your way through school. The time will pass anyway. Get your law degree. And she really pushed me. And I thought, you know what? After that point, it was so many years later, and I said, I can do this now. I'm ready. So I decided to do that. And I went back part-time. I worked my way through Southwestern Law School, which is such a wonderful institution with such caring, amazing professors. And my academic success professor, Professor Ryan, I told her my story. She's the only one at the institution that knew. And she mentored me and encouraged me, David. And through that, when I was going back to law school, I did great. I got A's and B's. At that point, it was no problem. But I was committed to serving the younger students, because I was older at that point and had been through so much. And I saw in so many of my 1L peers, by the way, doing the 1L fall semester for a second time is like a sophisticated torture, so that was, and people were like, you did this before? And I was like, yeah. So I'll just finish up by saying this. I saw so many of my colleagues in the 1L suffering from some of the traps that I got myself into, not as bad, but I was mentoring them. And Professor Ryan told me, Rebecca, you're so good, at talking to students and counseling them. I was a peer mentor and a dean's fellow, in the law school when I was a law student. She said, have you ever thought about teaching? And I said, no, I was going to go get my law degree and make a lot of money like my dad. That was my trajectory. I was going to take over his law firm one day, keys to the castle, live his legacy. And she said, well, you might consider it because you're really good at it. And they opened up coincidentally, right when I was graduating, an academic fellowship for academic success. And I thought, you know what, this might be really great to do for 1 year, give back. I'm really passionate about this. I applied, I got the job, and I never left. And I realized that also doing one summer with my dad, where I was his law clerk, convinced me that just for me personally, living in the world of high stakes mass tort litigation would be for the things that I was trying to cultivate would be too challenging for my the emotional growth that I wanted to do. So, and also working with my dad was, he's such a wonderful man, but he didn't get to where he was by being soft. He settled the #1 tort mass tort case in California's history for over $1 billion. And I was his law clerk during that, leading up to the pre-litigation before the settlement. And it was just, David, I mean, it was exciting. And for everyone who does litigation, I mean, it's a wonderful world. And I tell my law students, a lot of people are cut out for that. They can be well, they can do that work, and they can thrive. And it's a wonderful life. Just for me personally, I saw in that one summer, this isn't for me. So I ended up teaching then the Southwestern hired me full time.
Let me pause you there, because
Yeah.
I have an important question for you. So if you think you went vulnerable, get ready. You said your dad died 6 months ago, and obviously you mentioned him several times, and you're clearly really close. When did he die? What day was it? What was
August 10th of 24.
And can you said the 3 big D's and death of the parent. Just to be fully transparent, my mom died May 14th. So it speaks to me, and I'm still like in denial, trying to figure it out. And it was not expected. And she walked into hospital and died 26 days later. So, and the other thing that I can relate to you, my dad, who was alive and in good shape, he was a successful personal injury attorney for a long time, and actually was the original founder of Lawline and the idea behind it. See episode 1 to learn more. But he always wanted me to be in law and practice there, which made it the last thing. I'd never wanted to go into personal injury. And so one, I want to ask you a 2-part question. I'm not going to ask you the second part, because then we'll just start answering that. But I just want to see how you're doing, how you're dealing with it. This is completely going a different direction than I thought we were going to go. But I think a lot of people in our age bracket are starting to deal with this right now. And you're a wellness coach, so you have training here, but obviously, I don't know. I just wanted to get a sense, and if you can share, like, it was how did he die? Like, what was how are you doing, and take us through that.
Thank you, David. I'm so sorry to hear about your mom. And we share this, this is kind of a unique thing. My dad also, he walked into the hospital on August 4th and he was gone on August 10th. So it's that unexpected, he was only 71, that unexpected nature of the death. 3 months later, after he passed, my grandmother, who 1 day short of her 102nd birthday passed, but that was expected. And she lived a long life. And it's so different when you have a parent pass unexpectedly, especially one that you're quite close with. So thank you for asking how I'm doing. I haven't spoken about that publicly at all, but because we're being intimate and vulnerable, I'm just going to go for it. It was crushing. It was completely crushing. And one of the reasons why it was so hard is because I never felt seen by my father. Even though I had, many students have told me, and I say this with the utmost humility, that my courses have changed their life. That some students have come to me and said in confidence, if not for you, I would have dropped out of law school. My passion in teaching law students was to prevent them from having that existential crisis that I had. Then Jarrett and I ended up writing the book, to serve more students. And then we took, Jarrett was doing this work for law firms before I was. And then I joined in the law firm space to help young lawyers and partners, the full spectrum, to support them in their mental health, resilience, and well-being journey because of the passion that we both have. He's also been through a lot of personal crisis. So this is answering the question about how I'm doing. I still have an ego, although I've really beaten it down since I was young, but winning awards like the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing in 2017 featured our peak performance program that was at USC Gould School of Law. They featured that, as a program that's said to be commended in the nation. this just last week, Bloomberg Law recognized our work in the law school context, as innovative. We were the top awardees of the top 10 in the nation. So we're getting these awards, publishing the book. But my father never really saw the work that I do, or at least he didn't tell me, as valuable or meaningful, that I could feel that he always wanted me to follow in his footsteps and make a lot of money. And because, that was sort of his measure of success, of a legacy. But
Did he grow up? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. After his death, I struggled with missing him, with the immediacy of the passing, with feeling like I never had the chance to get him to tell me, I'm proud of you. Your work matters in the legal space and beyond, both the legal academia and with lawyers. But then what happened was it was such a blow. His passing, unexpected passing, was such a blow that it forced me into intensive therapy. I had come off of a 4-year postpartum depression with my daughter, and I was just getting well from that when this death occurred. So I went to my teachers, Victoria Allen, Sandy Brewer, Luca Basurgi, my mentors in the space of personal growth. And I was blessed with the resources to have weekly therapy sessions. And I discovered something, even though I've been a lifelong learner for 20 years since the story I just told, and really coming far in my in my battle with the ego, recognizing what really is success and identity, this precious human life, living life for service. But what I hadn't conquered is that last vestige of tying my identity to being my father's daughter and really wanting his approval. So in his death, he gave me the greatest gift, which was the push off the cliff, to do the self-work, that final last piece of becoming fully independent, in this late time in life, in the 40s, after spending 20 years developing my career, developing myself, and recognizing that in a way I was still a child. In a small way, I was still seeking that parental approval. We look for approval from professors, from peers, from parents, from partners. And certainly my father was that larger than life figure, and his opinion mattered so much. But once he was gone, I thought, how am I going to find my validation? I want validation that what I do matters. And then, David, what I realize, and that maybe what we can explore at a later time together, offline, is how to serve our generation. When you lose a parent, there's so much loss. My uncle, my father's brother, told me, one of his friends said, it's like the library burns down because your parents have so much historical knowledge. And I want to ask him about that joke that I can't remember, or what was the name of that judge, who we went in front of, or the ski trip that we took, or that service project that you and I did together. So the library burned down. And then, of course, my mother fell apart, and trying to handle and support her and her grief, and the family dynamics that death brings up a lot of stuff, and who put the fun in dysfunctional, right? There's a lot of drama that goes down. So you have to be really well prepared when the death of a parent comes. And I thought I was, but I really wasn't. So I'll just conclude with this. My father's death was a great gift to me, and he's with me now more than ever. And I'll say to anyone who's dealing with illness with a parent, or a recent death like you are, David, that you're not alone. This unfortunately happens to all of us. Our own death happens, and the death of those we love, including parents. And the best thing that you can do is contemplate on their death now, especially if you have healthy younger parents. And I know that sounds morbid, but being present to life and death, your own mortality and the mortality of your parents, will support you in their eventual passing, because it will help you become present to them now, let go of grudges, celebrate, those wonderful memories, and also become more your own person, that you don't hinge your identity on your parents' approval.
There's so much to say to that. Number one, just to resonate about the library being burned down. I've never heard that in that way, and that resonates. Just to share some about me, So my mom had cancer twice before. She had cancer 16 years ago. She had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. They think she worked on Wall Street. She was part of the lawsuit from the World Trade Center because a lot of people who worked down there got blood disease from the air. So she then 8 years later got cancer again, which then they said was actually from the chemo. And then she had a bone marrow transplant, and then went through it. It was painful, but she got through it. And then it was 7 years later. And what's amazing is when she had her first cancer, a few months later, our twins were born. We have 3 kids. And so like just looking at the gift for a second, she had 16 years with her kids. But what I was getting at here was, you mentioned about the library burning down. I had a conversation about 2 years ago or somewhere around that, a year and a half ago. Somebody was talking about his mother died. And I was asking questions and they moved from, maybe they moved to Australia, I think it was. And I asked like, why? He goes, you know what? I never asked her and I don't know the answer, and I'll always do that. And because of that, and because the way you talk about your dad, the same thing with my dad, it's the dad who gets all the accolades, the prominence, the stories, the thought. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let that happen. And me and my son, who's amazing in terms of video editing and questions, literally, because it was on Mother's Day, my mom died 2 days after Mother's Day. 1 year to the date before she died, we filmed her and created a documentary where she shared her life and her story, literally a year to the day. And so obviously it's not everything, but just to have those. And she talked about our childhood and he put all these pictures with it. And during the funeral, we took like 4 minutes of that and shared it. And so then my son, Josh, I just did this with all of the grandparents now. So we have a little bit of that legacy. So anyways, I just thought of that when you said that. And the reason I asked the question, because before my mom died, I would have probably avoided that question because I'm like, I don't want to bother somebody about this painful thing. And I know for me, I want to talk about my mom all the time. I would talk about her 24/7. I want to talk about how she lived. I'll talk about how she died. I was there. I was holding her hand. I'll share something very quick because I don't think I've shared this publicly because of the way we started. I talked to you about the breath work that I did. But what I didn't tell you was, so that was, I did that about 3 weeks before my mom died. When, my mom was in the ICU and things going drastically and they knew it was going to be at any time. I was there and I was holding her hand, and I guess she went down. They were all standing around. I was holding her hand, and I was like, "This is the most impactful moment of my life." So what I did, I called my wife when it happened because she was with the kids, and so I'm like, I have to call her. And so the process of calling her to tell her I had a panic attack. I started hyperventilating. And the scene, my mom's, they're trying to see if she's alive. I fall on the floor hyperventilating in the ICU room. My body starts vibrating the same way my body was vibrating 3 weeks before, which if I didn't do that 3 weeks before, I would have thought I was dying. But I knew exactly what was happening because I did the breath work. And when you breathe, your body starts vibrating. And so I was able to calm down, and they gave me oxygen. I calmed down, and like there's this weird messed up thing in my head. Whatever's controlling all these things, I don't think it's a coincidence that I did that breath work 3 weeks before, preparing me for that moment. And I was just like, holy shit. So like, yeah, that was, and and then I don't know if you've seen since then, there's many signs that I've seen that my mother is with me in some form. Have you felt that?
Yes, David. And I'm so grateful that you brought that up. I'm very moved by your vulnerability, which is true leadership. I'm very grateful that you shared this, and I'm sure folks who are listening to this will be very appreciative for this very personal, beautiful moment that you shared. The power of connecting the dots. And I haven't spoken about this to my therapists and coaches and my husband, but not widely. But I'm moved to share this based on your openness, that I received absolute direct communication that my dad is still here, that something, whatever we want to call it, spirit, the other side, direct messages that are irrefutable in my view. The substance of which I won't go into, but possibly a fodder for an article of some sort that I never thought about sharing publicly until you mentioned this, because I think when you tell me that, my heart opens with gratitude and lightness and happiness that you've experienced that. And I think there's something really important about sharing these types of stories. I just finished Ram Dass, who was Richard Alpert in a different life, but Ram Dass became Ram Dass and wrote many books. And he wrote one of his last books before he died was Walking Each Other Home, Conversations about Death and Dying. And that was very helpful to me as I was saturated in death, both my father's death and my grandmother's death in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And these signs about, from those who have passed, who have crossed, and the notion of grief is natural and normal and important to move through. But the upliftment that although the body is gone, and I certainly miss my father terribly every day, like you said, I want to talk about him all the time, that larger than life magic man that he was, who did so much good, who was such a badass, who was such a force, who was so unique. I just want to talk about him all the time. So I'm appreciative for the chance to do so. But that notion that he's gone in his body, but he's not gone. And it really, it carries me through every day.
And I've talked to many people who have had parents die recently. Every single one, as irrefutable as our signs, either it still can mean we're in the Matrix and it's all fake anyway. But the other thing, remember I said I had two things I wanted to talk to you about. The other thing, and you kind of said it, that just sort of stood out to me. First of all, let me just say this. I am 100% confident your dad was proud of you, of all that you accomplished. I'm sure other coaches or therapists have told you that, but who you are and the way you talk about him, for whatever reason, everybody carries their own baggage, and but I can tell you that. And I'm sure if he had a moment, and he's trying to tell you that now, so that's for sure. But the learning thing that I see here, and I think it's a really important one, is when you were talking about being suicidal and you were talking about the pain that you're going through, the first thing I thought of, and the clearest thing there, and there's a parenting lesson here, is you didn't feel safe to go to your dad or your mom. Eventually you did to your mom, but at those times, and I understand, like you've explained why, like you don't have to get into, I understand that you weren't encouraged in the way that you were encouraged, like based on results. And all I can say is, and just again, going back to dads and parents, like my dad's died when he was 7. His dad was abusive. He was a mistake too. His sister was 12. His brother was 18. They were both abused. Because my dad died when he was 7, he wasn't. So he grew up with a single mom. All she did in life was encourage him that he can do everything he wants. And because of that, he said, well, he's encouraged both my parents. My mom more like always encouraged us. And I don't know, that's, to me, now that you're a professional in this, what's your thoughts about parenting and preventing a child from being so lost in that moment like what have you learned about that as a parent and for other parents who might be listening?
Yeah, what a great question, David. Parenting is such a phenomenal topic. As we parent in our personal lives and as we lead in our careers, some common themes come, especially with our children. What I've learned most from my own journey is that a parent who puts themselves in the position of sage without showing any vulnerability, without showing their mistakes, like my father did, runs the risk of the child will deify them like I did with my father, but runs the risk of that child believing that making mistakes is unacceptable and forming an identity around success only. In addition, believing that our job as parents is to shield our children, to encourage only the positive, without recognizing that the kaleidoscope of experience, the magic and mystery of this human incarnation is to fumble through life, to fail. The real learning is in all those failures. So when I talk to my daughter about her mistakes and failures, we celebrate those things as an exciting part of the journey of learning. We repeat mantras like, for example, there is no failure, there's only learning, that we don't care about results, only effort. And so that building a child that really believes that you as a parent aren't looking for them to achieve anything will ironically probably allow them to achieve everything they're meant to. So I think that results are not valued, and
Yeah.
effort is what's highlighted, that you as an identity, you're able to form in whatever way that you want. And I'm only here to provide you love, protection, and leadership up to a certain point. And then your emotional self-reliance needs to kick in. And that emotional intelligence piece, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I agree completely. And because we can't do a 5-hour podcast yet. I'm not there. And I'm like debating in my head, do we just say we end it here and we follow up with a different conversation later? Maybe have both you and Jarrett on together.
That would be fun.
And here's the things not to talk about today, but things to think about. Like, it's not easy building practice in PD in the legal space. And I saw a lot of logos on your site, a lot of clients. It's not easy working with your spouse. Maybe it's easier with your second spouse because you guys are like, you've been through it, but it's not easy. And then also trying to affect law students and their mental capacity. And so there's the passion of what you're doing. There's also the growth and scale of what you're trying to do. And so I'll just say I commend you for that. The book that you have by Wiley, because these are legal texts, they make them $42. So I was like, oh, maybe and there wasn't even a Kindle version, so I didn't get to see it yet. So, but I will buy it. And I'll get it. And let me ask you this: when is the book coming out for lawyers? Because I saw it coming.
Stay tuned.
Okay. Well, I can see why obviously there's a business side, but I can see why you got. And Jarrett, I love reading his posts on LinkedIn and all his content. So you're both so authentic. It's like nauseating, actually. You're too authentic. You're too out there. But it's very cute. It's really very cute. And your daughter sees that, and she's only 5, you said, but I'm sure they can tell. And I'm just glad we got to know each other a little bit deeper publicly here. And I don't know. I just think about this episode. I'm like, all I kept thinking about, how can we get this in front of more people? Because this is, whether it's law students or breathing, or you don't have to be a law student, high achievers. I don't know. I just think you were so vulnerable here, and it really can have an impact. So those are the things that I think about, but maybe maybe we'll have some ideas afterwards to get beyond just posting it, in social media, to really get to really have it have the impact that it deserves.
Thank you, David. I want to commend you and your team, everyone at Lawline. This is a really special forum. You're delightful. I look forward. That's the beginning of a long conversation. I feel
For
like
sure.
I look forward to
For
the
sure.
future. I'm sure Jarrett would love to come on. We could do a
Yes,
joint Q&A.
for
And
sure.
I look forward to the next time we get to.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.